Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Passion Institute podcast. I am so excited to have this amazing guest that we've got today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. Her name is Sally Foley Lewis. I have come across Sally dozens of times now over the last 4 years. And even though this does not say in her amazing long CV, which I'm going to shorten for today, she is also a current president of Professional Speakers Australia, starting her 2 year term. So let me tell you a little bit about her. So Sally inspires middle managers to be high performing, to be more purposeful, and to be more productive. Her presentations and her programs affect and impact people's confidence and their leadership and results. And her range of programs give you the ROI that often leaders and entrepreneurs are looking for without wasting the time and money. Because leadership development is not a one size fits all. She's a multi-award winning global expert. I have been there when she's been awarded a couple of things. She's a certified speaking professional. She's a virtual presenter as well as a facilitator. And she's authored multiple books, including having her book, The Productive Leader, endorsed by personal development guru Brian Tracy. That's a pretty big deal. The drive to support and skill middle level managers comes from her own CEO as well as her senior leadership experiences. And throughout all of her presentations, whether she's doing speeches or workshops or coaching or face-to-face or online, she talks about boosting productivity, confidence, and self-leadership. Sally, welcome.
Thank you, Shivani. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited to have you. Now, the podcast is called Passion Institute Podcast. So firstly, would really love to hear your views and thoughts about what does this word passion hold for you?
I think the word passion holds for me a really deep-seated emotional concept. It's the thing that's so ingrained in one person that whenever their passion is ignited, whether someone's talking about it or they see it or they feel it or they smell it or they taste it, there's this inner kind of joy that will come out, and not always seen by others, but it's almost this. Oh, when you asked this question, the first thing that came to my mind was there was one day I was driving to work years ago when I was an employee, and I was stuck in busy morning traffic. I actually stopped on what's called the Story Bridge in Brisbane, Australia, and the traffic was so thick we're just stuck on the bridge. And just sitting there, and then this butterfly comes along and just rested on my windscreen. And it was one of these things where I went, that butterfly was just for me. And I thought for the rest of the day, that just brought me joy. Now, a butterfly is not necessarily my passion, but it was this concept of this thing that was just for me. And I think that's what passion is. It's that thing that's just for me, and it lights me up. It energizes me. It's like flow, the theory of flow, where you can be so immersed in it you don't even know that time's passing. Hours can go by, and all of a sudden it's oh whoopsies. I've spent hours on that. So that's what I think of passion when you ask what does it hold. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that story of a butterfly. The thing about butterflies, my first book was full of them on the cover and all through the different pages. So that has a special meaning. Sally, we all have things that we go through, both personally and in our work, and sometimes they become those moments that transform us into who they are. They become that moment where we start to do things very differently. And it doesn't always have to be bad, but those moments are there. I'd love for you to take the listeners through what have been those couple of things in your life that have been those transformational moments.
Yeah, I think one of the ones was when my boss forged my signature. That was a massive moment. And it was my very first job out of university. So I was young, I was green, I was new to the world of, full-time work. And it made no sense. The context around it. Why would you even bother forging a signature when you're the boss? And this was in the day that psychological safety didn't exist. That wasn't a concept that was known, but it was definitely a moment where I felt unsafe to be there. If this person could forge a signature for 2 liters of milk, then what else are they going to do? And so I think that was a real pivotal moment for me when it comes to what does a leader look like? What does a leader do? It also was a moment where, you know, the ethics of things and the justice of things and doing the right thing really shone through for me, because following that moment, she made my life hell. She knew she did something wrong, and so she was going to make me pay for it. I should have really just reported her then and there to be done with it, but because I didn't, because I was so scared, I think she did her very best to put me in my place and keep me tiny and keep me small, so that I wouldn't do anything. Mind you, I fixed that in the exit interview, didn't I? But I went to town in the exit interview with her boss. But yeah, it was one of those moments where you don't do that. This is not leadership. This is not okay. Apart from being slightly illegal, it's just, I just was blown away with that, and I thought, this is how I will never be like this. I will never work for someone like this. I left as soon as I possibly could after that, and I think that was one of the biggest things that transformed me into who I am, and really reinforced one of my values, where you don't let the behavior go past you. And I get often accused of being someone who loves conflict, and I absolutely detest conflict, but I'm also the type of person that won't let something go past me. I kick myself daily because I kicked myself because I let her keep me small, and she made my life hell, and I should never have done that. And so since then, I have made sure that I call out behavior, that I challenge things when I think they're not being done right, or ethically or correctly. I don't mean do things my way. I mean, are you doing things the right way here, the legal way? I will challenge things, and it's not because I like conflict. It's because I think if I let a bad performance or a poor performance or a air quote naughty performance walk past me, then what sort of leader am I?
It's a really interesting thing, isn't it? Because sometimes we think, it's over a little thing, right? It was over a carton of milk or whatever, as your example said. But it's not that, it's the principle of it that sort of sits behind that. And yeah, that moment gives you that clarity, as I heard there, Sally, in terms of saying, I don't want to ever like that, but also, when do I call that out if I see that again around that? So yeah, that starts to define who you are and your values around that. Yeah, beautiful. Sally, my next question's around, always curious and interested in how do we hire people that are more passionate? How do we keep people that are passionate? How do we tap into people's passions? And because you work with middle managers, I'm always wondering whether you could answer this maybe in a couple of different angles. One angle could be the middle manager, him or herself, right? So the person that's doing the role of the middle manager, and how do we keep them passionate? But also, because they're then managing other people, the other angle also could be, how have you seen that? What are your tips? What seems to work when you're working with different organizations, with different managers? I'd love to hear some of your views around it.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the biggest things that we hire for the well, I guess, sorry, I'm just trying to think now from the different angles. So let's start with middle managers. I think middle managers, one of the things that they crave is having a level of authority and responsibility that matches what they're doing. And oftentimes they have all the responsibility and no authority. And I think if they were able to step up into their role even more, and be given that scope and that freedom to actually do the job that they're hired to do, then I think we'd see them feeling more passionate about the role. I think one of the things that most middle managers I talk to just say, I really love my team. I really just want to do a good job. I just want to be able to get on with things. And it's interesting because when I talk to the C-suite and senior executives, they say, I've got a great mid-level management team. I just want them to get on with things. So I'm like, where's this disconnect here, right? And so I think that there needs to be that conversation between the C-suite and the middle managers around, all right, well, let's redefine scope of authority and responsibility so that you can be fully immersed in your role and engaged in it, and then feel like you're actually doing something even more impactful, and feel as though what you're doing is purposeful, even more so. And I don't know about you, but one of the biggest things I talk about with middle managers is delegation and feedback. And in those two particular areas, we want our people to feel like they've had a sense of achievement, not just activity. If we want activity, then you multitask all day long. But if you want achievement, then you don't multitask, you delegate, you give good quality feedback, you help people move along in the work that they're doing so that they actually have a sense of achievement. And a sense of achievement is then reinforcing that the work you're doing is good work, it's valuable work, it's contributing. And I think that then amplifies passion. So, and that goes either way, right? So for middle managers, down with their team with feedback and delegation and achievement, but also up the line too. Yeah.
Mm.
I hope I've answered your question there.
You did. And I think I was just thinking about the activity part is really important, right? If you want activity, that's one thing, but if you want output, then you've got to look at that really differently. And that's one way of keeping people passionate when they're working on the biggest stuff, not just the amount of activity around that as well.
Absolutely. And I'll add to that as well, because in one of the programs I run, this always comes up when I say one of the ways to help, motivate and keep people engaged. We talk about acknowledging effort, and almost everyone in the room says, oh, I hadn't thought of that. And so, yes, we want achievement, but in order to get to achievement, there's always this process of acknowledging effort, and we don't have to be tokenistic. We don't have to be fluffy. It's actually, I can see that you're really working hard on this and I appreciate it, So acknowledging effort along the way is massive.
Yeah, it's huge. Every time I've done any research on it or written about it or heard other people about it, it's amazing. It's that little stuff that adds up to that. Sally, the next question, I always preface it by saying it's an unfair question, right? It's an unfair question because I could literally ask you for your list of the top 100 things. But with the people that are listening, and I'd love to hear, what are a couple of lessons you've learned? Sometimes people talk about the same. They keep having the same lessons, irrespective of what business they're running or organization that they work with. So just wondering, what are the couple of lessons that you've learned in business? Maybe those lessons are ones you're applying into your business, helping others, or maybe it's some of the common things that come in when you're working with others. I don't mind whichever way you want to look at that, but what are a couple of lessons that you've had and learnings that you've had in business?
I think from my own business perspective, I think one of the biggest lessons I've had is from one of my mentors who said, you're never as loud as you think you are. And therefore, it's about making sure that you are visible in front of the people who you want to buy you. And so that's one of the biggest things to keep in mind. You can never be as loud as you're not as loud as you think you are. And so we and the classic example was the Productive Leader book, the one with Brian Tracy. It took 18 months of relentless social media marketing, a massive mail out campaign for people to then actually start saying, who is this Sally person and what is she on about with this Productive Leader business? And so to me, that was a really good example of being relentless with something so that people can see and hear you. And I think so often people give up too early. They'll put some hard work in for 3 months. No one's hearing you. No one's talking to you, no one's ringing down, banging down your door, and so you give up. And I think it takes a lot more work and it takes a lot more effort. And if you believe in it, if you're passionate about it, if you're passionate about your thing, then keep going, and keep going till you are sick of it almost, not that you want to be sick of your passion, but if this stuff means something to you, then you're not going as hard as you think you are. So that's one of them. The other one I think in business is, and this one I'm going to flip over to the middle managers. So for people who are middle managers in organizations, I think one of the biggest lessons you can learn is that you have two teams. When I say to middle managers, when I say team, who do you think of? And they often think of just the team that reports to them down the line. And I then say, well, I believe you've got two teams. And so it's not just the team that reports to you, but it's actually the management team left and right of you, your colleagues. And I think that they need to be collaborating a whole lot more and spending time and effort building and strengthening the relationship with your mid-level management peers helps you be stronger in your role. You can go to them and say, what do you think of this change that's coming? How are you handling this change that's coming? Or I've got this staff member doing XYZ. How do you handle that sort of stuff? Or I've got this project. I'm wondering, is there any economy of scale for you to be part of this? Could we save money or time? Do you have anybody in your team that does XYZ and I could borrow them for a while? We could, do a bit of a development opportunity. So I think from an internal perspective for middle managers, remember you've got two teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And people don't often ask, right? So if they did actually ask and you've got a true collaborative sort of group together, then people would be able to do that. Yeah, absolutely. So how do you deal with problems? Those problems come up all the time, personal life, work life. Do you have a process? Do you have a methodology? Do you sit down? Do you allocate time every week? How do you go about it? I'm always curious to learn how people tackle problems.
Yeah, I talk. I want to understand more. Help me understand why is one of my favorites. And it's a case of when a problem comes up, I want to understand why it's a problem, how it's come about. And I might sound like I'm trying to find blame, but that's not where it's coming from. What it's coming from is, first seek to understand, right? And so I really want to understand why this is a problem, who's it's going to impact, what are some of the ideas that people have come up already, what help do you need from me, and, for example, as a president of a national board, my job is to help people do their job to the best of their ability. So my job is to help them find the way through something. It doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to do it. But it does mean that I'm the person who has to facilitate that process. And so I tend to fall into a lot of talking. I tend to fall into a lot of consulting and getting opinions. And I don't mind being decisive. So let's just get on and fix it, right? And I'm actually okay. I'm the type of person that sort of says, all right, well, this is the information we have right now. Let's take the first step and then see what happens next. And then we'll take the next step because by then we may have different information. My problem-solving strategies is a lot of the time it's talk about it. I will admit every once in a while it's, dive under the doona and just ignore it for 5 minutes because I'm human, depending on what it is. But there you go.
Yeah, awesome. That's really great. And also, they come up all the time, and I'm always interested in how people break them up and what do they do and what are their systems or their methodology around it. Sally, what about your future passions? Like when you look at, and sometimes people say it's over the next year, some people say it's a 10-year, some people say it's their big, hairy, audacious goal over their lifetime. I don't really mind what time frame you want to go out to, but I'd love to hear a little bit about your future passions. What else do you aspire to? What other things do you want to do? Again, they could be work related and business related or not.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, well, one of my passions is actually long walks. And so in 23, I did a Camino. I walked the Portuguese coastal Camino. And then this year I walked, in 2025, walked the last 100 kilometers of the Via Francigena in Italy. And so I think I found a new passion there. And so, although traveling overseas and doing the long walks costs a bit of money, I'm loving it. And so my future passion is to walk even more different caminos or long walks. And it's not necessarily hiking, although there are some horrible hill days, I won't lie. Um, but it's long walks, and I love to do that. So I really am making sure that that is part of my future. And planning that. I think it was the second last night of the first Camino, and I was already planning the next one. So, and same again for this year. But I think also from a work perspective, it's to really hone in on making sure middle managers have the resources they need to be the most courageous and capable and confident leaders that they can be. I think they are the forgotten cohort, and so I feel emboldened that I need to be there to be creating resources and support, and whether it's presentations or workshops or online courses, whatever. That I am there for middle managers. I want to be known as the number one person to go to for middle managers, because I know what it was like when I was a middle manager. I lived it. I know what it was like when I had to lead middle managers. And so I really don't want any middle manager to go through the experiences that I went through. So, yeah.
Yeah, often when I'm speaking to people, sometimes those business ideas do come from because we've experienced it.
Mm.
Sometimes, obviously, we see that gap in the marketplace to say, hey, that's something that I can, have a say into. Sally, you give a lot, you travel, you're on this volunteer board, as I said in my introduction of you. And, that's a big role, being the president of a national organisation, doing all the different travelling to different chapters and also representing Australia in the on a global level. Like, that's a lot, and that's just the volunteer role. Then you've got your own passions, and you've got your businesses wanting to be known as the middle manager expert, the go-to person for that. There's a lot of giving out in that. And so I want to know what you do for your own wellness, whether it's, again, you talked a bit about physical wellness with your walking and the training, obviously, that would go into doing these long walks. But what other rituals do you have? Do you do them daily or weekly, or do you go somewhere once a year? What are some of the things that you do in your giving, but to also receive and nurture yourself?
That's a brilliant question. Um, who is the author of Givers and Takers? Adam Grant, that's it. He wrote a book called Givers and Takers, and I am very much a giver. I actually got angry reading that book, but there you go. Because it's like, where are all the givers to Sally? But it was a good realization that that's just who I am. And it actually fills my tank to give. And so I need to just acknowledge that and run with it. But I do regular massages. I have gone on retreats. Probably could do with doing that a bit more. I do like them. Maybe every other year that I'm not doing a Camino, I could do a retreat. And, it's interesting that once I got into this long walks process and doing long walks, that actually has helped me be even more equipped and having my tank full. Even though I would go on walks most days and take the dogs for a walk, the actual long walk thing was something to look forward to. And so that actually was really good for my mental well-being. And, even though every other day, if I'm walking the dogs, I could be podcast in the ears or a book in the ears and listening away. and listening to not just business books and leadership books, but also um, novels like escapism, some trashy novel stuff, something juicy just to escape and lift and be light about things. Because I think sometimes that when we run our own business, we can be, oh, I've always got to be into this leadership development or this business development, or it's always got to be this. And a friend of mine actually, and this is where I got it from, they read a novel, then read a business book, read a novel, read a business book. And so I've taken that up as well. And I think it just keeps things a bit light. You don't have to be constantly into the heavy of everything that's business related. And so I love a good dinner party, except we've just ripped our lounge room apart, so that needs to be fixed before we invite people over again. But, catching up with friends, making sure you do stay connected with your friend and your friendship circle, I think is mission critical. You want a group of people around you who cheer you on. They don't have to necessarily understand what you do, and a lot of my friends don't. They think I'm crazy to want to be standing on a stage and speaking publicly, as you might well know too, Shivani, because you do the same. Public speaking, are you crazy? Yes, we are. But they love that I get to do what I love to do, and they cheer me on. And I think that's also something that's really critical for your mental well-being. That circle of people, the massages and the retreats, and the walking, and I think also one of the other things is I'm quite lucky that my husband is a shift worker, because then we could take a midweek weekend. So, we can bunk off for a couple of hours and go to the beach, or go out to lunch in the middle of the week. And we aren't necessarily restricted to the weekend as such. Now, I'm also unlucky because I don't have children, and it's something I always wanted. But because also we don't have children, then we also have freedom, right? We have a different kind of freedom. And so we need to make the most of that.
There's a lot there. There's a lot of interesting and amazing things there, Sally, each one that we could dive into. Sally, for people that are wanting to go do work on their middle managers, whether they're a middle manager themselves, whether they're a leader or a founder wanting to work with their middle managers, what's the best places, platforms to find you?
Well, I'd say just Google my name, Sally Foley Lewis, because there is only one of me, and many people would say, "Thank goodness." So there's only one Sally Foley Lewis, but I mainly hang out on LinkedIn. So would love to connect and love to support any middle manager, because I do think that the best is in the middle. I talk about middle managers are like hamburgers. The best is always in the middle. So yeah. LinkedIn. Start with LinkedIn or Googling my name.
Sally, thank you. It's been such a pleasure having you, and thank you for all you do, not only with the work that you do, but also all the volunteer work that you're doing with Professional Speakers Australia or PSA. Appreciate you. We'll chat a little bit longer now, but thank you for being on.
Shivani, thank you, and thank you to the Passion Institute for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.